My husband's fertility issues led to a huge family fight. So before I start telling you guys what happened last night, I'll tell you a bit about the backstory. I will try to keep it as short as possible. My husband and I have been together for almost 10 years now, and we're incredibly happy together. 2 years ago, around 10 months after getting married, we had the talk and decided we'd try for a baby to complete our little family. It sadly hasn't been working out. My husband has struggled with medical issues in the past, and despite his doctor saying it's all good, he is blaming himself and his medical past for us not getting pregnant. We both have rather healthy lifestyles, are young, have a healthy and fulfilled sex life, and it should work, but it has not happened yet. We know that that's how it is sometimes, but it still hurts every month. He has no contact with his family, but we're really close with my parents, my older brother and his husband. Every year we make a family trip, my parents, my husband, and I, my brother, his partner and their 2 daughters, and our maternal grandparents. This year we rented a big cabin to go for hikes, play snow with the kids, and relax near the fireplace. Sounds lovely, right? It has been until last night. After the kids went to bed, we all sat in the living room and talked about whatever when the topic of us having kids came up. My grandma asked if we're considering kids, and we just said yes, that we're working on it but no success yet. We didn't give them any detail because especially my husband is uncomfortable to talk about that with anyone but me. We thought that topic is done with our answer, but my grandparents started lecturing us about the easiest way to get pregnant. Stuff like not being stressed about it, just going with the flow and eating certain food to increase sperm count. My parents, not ill-willed, joined in on the conversation, telling us that neither of us kids were planned and we're just gifts, and how amazing unexpected pregnancies can end. I tried to shut them down after every sentence, but they just kept talking. My husband just sat on the table staring into nothingness until my grandpa, the 1950 type of guy, said something along the lines of how easy it should be for a real guy like my husband to get a woman pregnant. That was the drop that made the glass overflow. He snapped and just started not really yelling but talking loudly about how it fucking sucks that I'm not pregnant and how we're both crying when I start my period. How he hates himself for not getting the easiest and most manly thing done, and that it's been fucking with his masculinity ever since we started. It was heartbreaking. My husband is not big on emotions, but I saw tears in his eyes. He excused himself and went upstairs. I went after him, and this has been the first time and basically ever that he cried in my arms. My parents came upstairs to apologize, but I told them to let the situation rest and wait until today. My grandparents are big mad and have been complaining nonstop about how rude and overreacting my husband is. I told them to mind their business and to leave when they're not ready to have a civil conversation. They did, and now we're all getting texts from extended family about my toxic husband. I never had the urge to cut contact with any of my family members, but I can't deal with this BS anymore. My parents and brother apologized and they made up, but now we're being harassed by the rest of my family. Comment. Here's how you shut them down. Our sex life and reproductive choices are none of your business. Stop, where that's not something we discuss outside of our relationship. Sure, they may have been well-meaning, but it was your job to shut that shit down. And seriously, get you and your husband some peace of mind and go see a fertility doc. Your husband is assuming it's him, and maybe it is. But maybe it's not. Regardless of the impediment, there are tons of options out there to help. You need facts on the table, not guilt and worry. Hang in there. Is the specialist a reproductive endocrinologist? I ended up having to do IVF and was in communities for people with infertility. The universal sentiment was always that everyone wishes they had seen Henri sooner. I used to hear that well-meaning advice all the time, and it honestly soured me on a lot of people. And then of course when you finally snap, people act like you are overreacting. It was one of the loneliest periods of my life. I wish you well. People really should stop asking people when they are having kids. It's rude, invasive, and frankly, weird. Your parents and grandparents were talking about how you should have unprotected sex and were giving instructions. This woman at a coffee shop we go to regularly consistently asked my husband and I when we are facing kids, we've consistently said never. She kept telling us how much of a blessing kids are, which we don't doubt, has given us books on parenting so we could learn. My husband is an MD. My husband talked to her privately and asked her to stop. She didn't. Finally, after a solid year of her asking, I told we had a stillbirth that resulted in me having a hysterectomy. She looked me dead in the eyes, said I could have just told her we weren't going to have kids, no need to embarrass her. They're mad that he's upset that y'all haven't had a kid yet? After stating over and over and over what a blessing children are, they're mad that he wants that blessing? He wasn't even upset at the cheap shots to his manhood. He was upset that he doesn't have a kid that they are also upset about. Your grandparents are netters. They're upset because they wanted him to get defensive about the cheap shots. Instead, Op's husband showed maturity and made himself incredibly sympathetic by showing that he is devastated that they aren't pregnant yet, which made grandparents' plan completely backfire. They're getting ahead of it by feeding extended families some BS. If you don't cut contact with your grandparents over this, it will destroy your relationship with your husband forever. Age/ignorance is no excuse for your grandparents' behavior. My grandparents are 90 and they would never be so insensitive. Your grandparents are bullies. You must stand up for your husband and take extreme action to defend him, meaning cut them off entirely and make it clear that it's because of their abusive words. Also, avoid thinking of your husband as having snapped and trauma dumped. These are shaming words. He had to stand up for himself because you weren't doing a good enough job of standing up to your own family. They were wrong. He had every right to express his feelings. Clearly, in your family, men are held to a rigid standard of masculinity. Don't reinforce that by shaming him for expressing his feelings. Story 2. My wife was seen holding hands with another man. My wife and I have been together 5 years and got married last year. We definitely have our ups and downs, but we're generally happy. On Friday, she went out with people from her work for Christmas drinks and arrived home around midnight absolutely hammered. She just said she'd had a good time and went straight to bed. Yesterday, I got a message on Instagram from an anonymous account claiming to be one of her colleagues saying she'd been flirting all night with one of the guys from the office and they'd left together at about 9 to walk to the train station. The colleague had a couple more drinks for then went to the station herself, and says she saw my wife walking hand in hand with the guy through the station at about 10:45. They didn't see her. Last night I showed her the message and asked her for an explanation. She claimed she was so drunk she doesn't remember anything that happened after about 8 p.m. I asked if she went somewhere with the guy after they left the group and she checked the location history on her phone, which confirmed that they had gone to a bar near the station for about an hour. They arrived at the station at 10:40. She gave me her phone and insisted I check it and there were no suspicious messages or anything. As far as I could tell, she doesn't have the guy's number in her phone and they're not following each other on Instagram or friends on Facebook. I asked if she was flirting with him and she admitted that she was talking mostly to him all night, but that's just because he's the only person in her office she has anything in common with and that they're just friends and it wasn't flirting. She's mentioned this guy to me before and said how much they have in common. I asked if they were holding hands and she said she doesn't remember, but she doesn't think so. She claims to know who sent me the message and says it's a woman in the office who hates her, although she doesn't know why. Today she's been in a terrible mood and we've not really spoken. So that's where we are. I'm not sure what to do. Is this as big a red flag as it seems to be? Comment. There are a collection of issues here, but the terrible mood today seems a big one. The information you received is largely correct. It looks a bit fishy, and instead of reassurance she is in retaliation mode, no doubt focusing on her office rival. She should be apologizing and doing what she can to defuse the situation. Getting so drunk you can't recall and focusing on a particular man and going off privately with him. I wonder what she would feel if this was something you had done. Tell her to lose the attitude and figure out how she plans to sort this out. OP should really focus on this advice. She voluntarily gave up her phone for examination. Unless she has a second cell phone, chances are that she isn't having an affair. OP should check her car for it. If there is no affair, she should at least be attracted to him to get a point where she is holding hands with him. That, combined with the fact that she isn't going into crisis mode but is generally just pissed at her colleague, points to the fact that she is a shitty partner. Not necessarily a cheater, but a very shitty partner nevertheless. Just had a huge holiday office party. I stayed till the end last year and I can confirm that multiple people were absolutely smashed. I only stayed a bit this year, but majority of people didn't show up to work the next day. Happened at my last job as well. People were falling down the stairs, they were so drunk. I work in a corporate setting too. It doesn't excuse cheating or flirting, but work parties always has those people that don't know when to stop drinking/boundaries. Dumbass. I'll never forget having to pull someone into my office that following Monday to counsel someone who didn't work for me. He got really drunk and is a mean drunk. His own management was so pissed at him that his job was in danger. He was scared shitless and didn't know what to do. Told him to go to each and every person that he was a jerk to and apologize, as well as the owner. Then suggested he give up drinking because it made him mean. I have seen my fair share of people who were absolutely blackout drunk at work functions. Nearly 1 out of every 10 people in my field is an alcoholic and, on average, Roughly 20% of alcoholics are considered high-functioning alcoholics, so this actually tracks in my experience. We had our work Christmas party last week, pretty respectable career, free bar. Started drinking at 4 p.m. and wasn't blackout drunk at midnight despite doing my best. The lack of memory is a very convenient excuse. However, I did hold one of